The city of Townsville is actually a place that exists. In the late 90s, Cartoon Network took a gamble when it premiered its fifth cartoon, The Powerpuff Girls. This show was unlike anything on air at the time, but it became a huge success, earning 6 seasons, lots of merchandise, and a theatrical film. I really enjoyed the original Powerpuff Girls. It had a cast of memorable characters, a great sense of humor, and a very unique tone, which I'll talk more about later. But as great as it was, the show took a turn for the worse around the time it switched to computer animation. It became much slower, unmemorable, and had way too many episodes that were just extended fight scenes, or had hardly anything in them. I don't hate the last few seasons of the Powerpuff Girls, but I certainly wouldn't mind if they never existed. The reason for this drop in quality was likely due to the creator, Craig McCracken, leaving the show to work on Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. And we've all seen what can happen to shows when their creators step down. Despite the show's drop in quality and cancellation in 2005, Cartoon Network has still attempted to revitalize the Powerpuff Girls numerous times. There's been everything from an anime series to a mediocre special and a new art style. And now we have a brand new ongoing series. After almost 2 years of hype and speculation, the Powerpuff Girls reboot is finally here. Before it aired, my thoughts on the series were mixed. Sure, I didn't like how the voice actors were changed or how Craig McCracken wasn't going to be involved, but to be honest, the show didn't look that bad. There were problems with the clips and ads that were released, but I still found something to like in all of them. But now that a couple of episodes have aired, it's time to see if this show is filled with Chemical X, or if the Powerpuff Girls has lost its mojo. Hardly anything has changed with the basic premise of the show. The Powerpuff Girls still follows 3 super-powered little girls who fight crazy villains in the city of Townsville before bedtime. On the surface, this new series appears to be pretty similar to its predecessor, so much so that some of the episodes feel like they could have appeared in the original series. However, quite a few changes have been made, and in this review, I'll analyze and give my thoughts on them. In interviews, the creators of the new series made it clear that this reboot is focused more on characters than the original series. There's a lot less adventure and fighting in the episodes that have aired so far, giving the characters room to be themselves. Because of this shift in focus, I expect the characters to be just as good, if not better than they were in the original show. Sadly, the show doesn't seem to add any more depth to its characters. They still have good personalities, but no character seems to have been fleshed out any further than they did in the original series. For example, Blossom is a lot less perfect than she once was, which is fine by me, since her perfection really got on my nerves every once in a while. However, besides that, Blossom is about the same as you remember her, although she is obsessed with keeping organized now, which I guess is kind of a new character trait. This seems like a missed opportunity to make the characters really shine, and could help the show differentiate itself from the original series. But I can completely understand why the show has been playing it safe so far. I think this new series may just be trying to find its footing and attract new viewers, and I can understand that. Most of the old characters return for this series too, especially everyone's favorite character, Robin! You know, the Powerpuff Girls' neighbor who appeared in the episode that had a 2-minute music video shoehorned in? She's back in a pointless cameo! Woo! But on a serious note, Ms. Bellum seems to have left the show almost completely, and I'm alright with that. Don't get me wrong, she was a good character, and I'll have to suspend my disbelief a little to believe that the mayor will be able to run the city without her. But other than a couple of great moments, she never really stuck out to me that much. But it's not like she completely disappears. The show addresses Ms. Bellum's disappearance and gives her a pretty decent send-off. Because it's handled so well, this is one change with the characters I can get behind. Unlike how Cartoon Network chose to recast the girls and some of the other characters for absolutely no reason. You probably heard enough people complain about this, so I won't harp on it for long. While I would have liked to see the original voices of the girls return, now that I've heard the new actresses in a couple of episodes, I can say that they're fine. They're not as great as the original actresses, but they don't do a terrible job either. Sure, it kinda seems like they're just trying to imitate the originals sometimes, but they still voice the characters pretty well, and I got used to them. The rest of the original cast returns, like Tom Kane, Tom Kenny, and of course, Roger L. Jackson returns to voice Mojo Jojo. Even after all these years, he still does the best voice on the show.
Hey, wait! I'm not finished! I said don't fall! Don't fall! Then my power!
The first thing you'll probably notice when you look at this new series is the brand new art style. Gone are the thick outlines and minimalistic backgrounds. The lines on the characters are a lot more softer, and all of the background elements have a little more detail to them. It looks like a hybrid between the newer art style from the original series and the art style from Clarence. Speaking of that series, almost all of the background characters look like they were taken right out of Aberdale and plopped right into Townsville. They look very out of place when they stand next to characters that were designed by different people 2 decades ago. While this design choice does make the main characters stand out from the others, it still looks very sloppy, especially since all of the kids the Powerpuff Girls hang around with look about 11 or 12, when the girls are supposed to be 5 or 6. One thing about the animation that I do like is the coloring. Everything has a slight painted look to it, and it looks very nice, especially during these reaction shots or in the night scenes. It's not the best coloring I've ever seen, but it can make some scenes stand out and look pretty, and I like pretty things. This reboot is animated fairly well, although the animation can be pretty slow and choppy at times, mostly during the fight scenes. You'll have to take my word on the following statement, since my footage of the episodes is pretty slow. Whenever a character is hit, the impact of the blow is either hidden by a flash of light, or is hardly shown. I know that fits in with the lighthearted tone the show is going for, but it just doesn't look very good. While I do enjoy this show's art style, minus the background characters, the animation is a little disappointing, considering how well some of Cartoon Network's other shows are animated. But since most of my problems come from the action scenes, which aren't as frequent as they were in the original series, I can let the animation pass, even though it's alright and sometimes has a few errors every now and again. I know this might be a minor thing, but so far, I'm really enjoying the music that this series has showcased so far. To be honest, I love the new theme song, Who's Got the Power? It introduces the characters well, it's catchy, has a unique art style, and is animated really well. It's like a high-energy rock update to the original end theme, and it really gets you hyped for the episode to begin. While the lyrics may be a bit cheesy, predictable, and promote girl power, I think I might even like this more than the opening to the original series. But as good as the intro is, the great music doesn't stop there. This show features a score by Mike Reagan, who also did the soundtrack for the first Ape Escape game. I haven't played that game yet, but I really like its soundtrack, and it perfectly fits the style of this new show. The score on this new series has a light techno beat, which turns into a big cinematic fanfare during fight scenes. It's not one of the best soundtracks I've ever heard in a cartoon. Heck, I still prefer the score from the original series over this, but I still like it. If I have anything very negative to say about the music, I'll say that the credits theme does not sound very good. It's very annoying and sounds like it was put together by a 5-year-old. You'll miss it if you watch any of the episodes on TV, but it's still something I felt that I had to mention. The original Powerpuff Girls was a comedy, and this reboot is no different. However, unlike the original show, some of the jokes work while others fall flat. And then you get jokes like this.
Remember 2 weeks ago when I made that Mojo meme generator?
And this.
OMG! Yes!
And who could forget this? What am I doing with my life? Depending on which episode you watch, you'll probably get 75% good jokes or 75% bad jokes. Alternatively, you may get an episode where there's just not enough humor altogether. There are long stretches in some episodes where there are almost no attempts to make jokes. And unlike a show such as Steven Universe, where that time between jokes is used to build up atmosphere and character moments, you just stare at your screen wondering when the next joke is going to happen. The plots sadly don't make up for the infrequent attempts at humor. A lot of the plots on this show are undeveloped and predictable, mostly because of the shift in focus. Instead of focusing on adventures that the girls go on with a slice-of-life element, You get slice-of-life stories with an element of adventure. These episodes can be very boring, mostly because they have cliches or borrow elements that were used in episodes in the original series. For example, the episode Powerpuff has Bubbles and Buttercup gaining new superpowers. Overall, this episode is pretty weak, but it could have been stronger if Blossom just accepted the fact that she can still be useful to her team despite not having the same exact abilities as them. But instead of a nice moment of character development, Blossom just gets brand new powers because the plot demands it. The writers actually put some thought and effort into the episode. It could have been a lot more than just a poor man's ice sore. This show also really likes to hammer in plot points and messages too. Going back to Powerpuff, there's a long sequence where Blossom is shunned by the rest of the town for not having the same powers as her sisters. This sequence goes on for over a minute and presents a message that was already made very clear in the previous scene. Another thing that bugs me is that Buttercup is overused. I know that this is a nitpick, but I still want to talk about it. Half of the first 6 episodes center around her, and she's frequently put in a spotlight that could easily be filled by any one of the other 2 girls. I think the reason this is happening is because Buttercup is the most marketable. She is a tomboy after all. And with Cartoon Network having a mostly male audience, it makes sense that CN would try to push her. I know that this is a small gripe, but it's still something I hope to see fixed in this show's future. Also, while I'm mentioning small things, the opening and ending of each episode has completely changed. In other words, there's no more the city of Townsville or the day is saved. Kind of. In a few episodes, the day is saved ending will play, but there's always some kind of twist involved. I understand why this will be removed. The writers probably just don't want to waste about 30 seconds of each episode. That's fine, but I don't understand why this would appear in some episodes and not all of them. This is a common problem I see a lot in this series. There's not a lot of consistency in many areas like the plot and animation. But before I wrap this review up, I've decided to rank the episodes that have aired in order from best to worst, so I can expand my thoughts on them. In my opinion, the best episode that has aired so far is Escape from Monster Island. This was a very strong start to the series and I really enjoyed it. It showcased the characters' personalities well, and it proved to me that this show can be better than just okay. My only complaint is that the twist at the end could have been handled much better, since Bubbles literally reveals it midway through the episode. Bye Bye Bellum. Ms. Bellum's send-off episode was pretty good. The new villain introduced was a great addition and managed to be a pretty clever and funny satire of fashion-obsessed women. I don't love how the mayor basically saves the day in this episode. It seems out of character for this bumbling idiot to become an action hero. This is one instance where the girls are completely useless and have to be saved by others without superpowers. Whenever it happens, it seems completely forced, and this has happened at least 3 times on the show so far. Also, all of the video game references didn't need to be here, but some of them were funny, and it's not like the Powerpuff Girls hasn't done video game references before. Tiara Trouble. Again, another good episode. The message was a little forced, but there were some good gags, and him was great. Man up. I love the new villain Man Boy. He was a fun parody of extremely manly men. And with the exception of one line, this episode didn't really showcase any blatant feminism. The same can be said for this series, which is good since I know a lot of people were worried about that. Getting back to this episode, it had some nice dark moments that I really enjoyed. And although it was similar to the Season 5 episode Make Zen to Me, it somehow managed to be even better than that in many ways. Painbow. The message was really hammered in, and it may have been a little quote-unquote too cute at some points, but overall I like the insanity that the town got into, which created some great humor. But I wouldn't mind if the people who wrote the twerking and yas jokes were fired. Princess Buttercup. Again, there was too much Buttercup in this episode, and on top of that, she and all the other girls were almost useless in the episode. They have to be saved by the new villains, the Derby Taunts, who I thought were alright, I guess. I did like Princess Moorbucks in this episode. She's less of a whiny brat and more of a lame, evil girl with lots of money. She was one of my favorite villains on the original series, and I'm glad to see her represented well here. The Stayover. It's a hangover parody! Get it? This one had a few good jokes, and Mojo Jojo was great as always. But overall, I was kinda bored for most of the episode. It's not bad, just a little unoriginal at points. Little Aki lost. This episode was fine. The villain didn't do much for me, but it had some nice character moments and a couple of good gags. Power Up Puff. This is where the episodes start to get bad for me. I already mentioned my problems with this episode, but I did think that it had a couple of good things going for it, particularly with the gags with the cooking show that the girls watch, and I also thought that both of the action scenes in the episode were very creative. Strong-armed. You know your episode is not very good when my favorite part is when your character almost dies. Overall, this episode was just boring and a poor man's Bubble Vicious. And finally, Horn Sweet Horn. This episode was executed terribly. It had a good premise that was muddled by too many plot conveniences, selfish characters, and a very confused moral. Kids, if you just believe hard enough that you are something else, then you might somehow turn out to be that thing. I think the episode was trying to tackle transgender issues or something. Well, whatever it was trying to do, it didn't do it very well. So I'm not very surprised that some people were offended by this episode. Also, Bubbles' voice cracks every time she says the word unicorn. It's much more irritating than you think, since she says it almost every other minute. Bottom line, this episode was a disappointing, confusing, and offensive experience I would not recommend watching. So now that I've gotten my thoughts on each of the episodes out of the way, let's talk about one more topic I'm not completely sure about: the tone of the new series. The early, and best, episodes of the Powerpuff Girls were essentially a balancing act. The show was constantly balancing dark and light elements together to create an environment that was both fun and tense. A game of Duck Duck Goose and the brutal murder of a monster could exist in the same environment. This was part of what made the original Powerpuff Girls so much fun to watch, and it helped the show stand out from the other cartoons airing at the time. But in the new series, there isn't a very consistent balance between light and dark elements. Darker elements are a lot less common now, the violence has been toned down, and the villains are much less menacing than before. The Powerpuff Girls is now a very different show. There's definitely no blood in the intro of this series. You think that I would hate this reboot since it doesn't contain what made its predecessors so special. But I don't, for a number of reasons. First of all, it's almost impossible to expect that this reboot would be exactly like the original series. I'm not trying to insult the crew of the new show, it's just that the world has changed a lot since the Powerpuff Girls premiered in 1998. Most of the violence seen in the original series would probably be censored if it was aired today. Heck, the violence was even toned down in seasons 5 and 6 of the original show. So if you wanted to see more monsters be torn limb from limb, I'm sorry to say that we're probably never going to see anything like that again. Secondly, there was more to the original show than just the balancing act. There was also a lot of good humor and heart. Sure, when I think of the Powerpuff Girls, I immediately think of little girls beating up giant monsters. But the humor and heart were still a very important part of the show. And you know what? This new series does a pretty good job with those other two elements. While I already said that the humor was mixed, this show's heart is definitely in the right place, and it still has some heartwarming and slower moments along with the action. Overall, while the tone of this new show may not be exactly what you expect, there's still enough reminiscent of the old series that makes this show worthy of being called the Powerpuff Girls. Overall, my thoughts on the new Powerpuff Girls are mixed. On the one hand, the characters are just as you remember, the art style is nice, the music is great, and the show feels close enough to the original series without completely ripping it off. On the other hand, the characters can be bland and unlikable, the new voice actors are fine but unnecessary, the animation is not very good, and the plots are predictable and hammer in plot points and morals. I can definitely see that the people behind this show are trying to make a good product, but sometimes it just feels like a soulless mess that was made just to sell toys. The Powerpuff Girls reboot has both good and bad, and I give it a 6 out of 10. It's a fine show, and I feel that a lot of people are just overreacting to bad jokes or little details, and are going out of their way to bash the show. Not all people are like this, but if you haven't seen the show yet, give it a fair chance. But if you do hate the show, that's fine. Just don't hate on it because it exists. One more note that I like to make is that I would keep a close eye on this show, since it's reminded me of another reboot of a classic Cartoon Network superhero show. You may have heard of it. It's a little show called Teen Titans Go. Go started out fine, but slowly became much worse over time. The new Powerpuff Girls show seems like I might be heading towards the same direction. Although the Powerpuff Girls episodes we've seen are much better than anything I've seen on Teen Titans Go. Although I'm a little worried, I still think the new Powerpuff Girls can have the power as it continues. Now, if you excuse me, I'm going to look at the merchandise for the new series, because I'm a sucker for cartoon collectibles.
And you know Bubbles, she plays all around. You also have Professor Plutonium.
Professor Plutonium? How could someone who is probably just a spokesperson that has nothing to do with the new series make a mistake like that? Forget it! This show now gets a 0 out of 10. Would not watch again. And so, once again, my childhood is ruined, thanks to the Powerpuff Girls.
Don't forget to like and subscribe. Did I say that right?
Open your eyes and take in everything that you see. Look at all the colors, red, yellow, blue, and green. We can see the airplane and fly across the globe. Look down upon the colors, everyone, come on, let's go. Because love, 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 love makes the world go round. Love, 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 love makes the world go round.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.